3 photographers from 3 different time zones, all connected by night photography and all shooting with the Pentax K1. We are the Nightaxians. We've photographed a lot of things together, and they've all been great experiences, but one of the experiences we had was probably a little bit more elevated than others just because of what I would consider to be the creep factor on that. You know, when you're out shooting old gas stations and, you know, barns and things, you know, it's interesting, but you're not like, ooh, you know, even if you're near a cemetery, sometimes it doesn't really matter. But we all shot a place a few years back down in West Virginia that was probably, if you had asked me what are the creepiest places I feel like I've shot, like I'm not a ghost believer, but that gave me the willies to be there. Right. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the single creepiest place I've ever photographed.
Yep, exactly. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit about this, Ken, because I know you got some of the history on it, but you also went into a particular spot on this property that neither Mike or I ventured into by choice.
So, yeah, and that would be the Sugar Shack. And we took a tour during the day in which the tour guide was, he had worked there. He had worked there, and so he had quite a lot of inside knowledge. But anyway, before I do that, I'll go into I'm going to tell a little bit about Moundsville. So the full name is the West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville, West Virginia, and it was the oldest state penal institution and was in continuous use until 1995, and it was it made one of the 10 most violent correctional facilities list, in the U.S. government. So, but it was built in 1866, and then that was just 3 years after West Virginia had seceded from Virginia, and it closed in 1995. So we're talking about a really long run. Now, during that run, there were over 100 prisoners who were executed either through hanging or electrocution. There were riots, plenty of riots, fires, hangings, and in fact, the hangings were public. And so you could actually show up as a member of the public and watch a prisoner get hanged. However, this changed in 1931 when a guy who didn't have very strong neck muscles was decapitated. So they closed hangings to the public after that. I just want to stop right here and say they didn't stop hanging people. They just stopped the public from coming.
In the public.
Yeah, but just think about that for a second from a logistics standpoint. You know, imagine what that meeting was like. Well, you know what? We can't be having those kids seeing those heads get ripped off. Now, good hanging, okay. But those heads rolling, nope, can't do it. So that's an interesting line on where to draw. We saw that building, right? There's like a platform.
Yeah.
And it has this.
I'll see if I can find a picture
on top,
of it.
I believe. So they also used an electric chair called Old Sparky. They used that as well. So it was just extremely violent. Like a lot of penitentiaries, they had something called the Sugar Shack. And I've noticed that there's Sugar Shacks in several different penitentiaries. So it might be some sort of a term, but that was definitely the case here. So the Sugar Shack was this basement recreational room. And basically the guards turned a blind eye to what was going on in here. So they would look the other way and they wouldn't even go down in there. So what was happening there? Well, you can just only imagine: gambling, fighting, rapes, all sorts of things, and of course murders. So I went down into this room probably against my better judgment because we had taken the tour and I wanted to go down there because in my infinite logic and wisdom, I thought, it's not quite nighttime yet. It's still very much blue hour and it's very bright outside. So I'm going to go down to the darkest place, which is the basement down in the sugar shack, and I'm
Mhm.
going to photograph in there and get a couple of interior shots, and then I'll come back up and it'll be dark. Make lots of sense, right? So I went down there and I immediately got the creeps. It was completely dark, but there was just this real sense of foreboding, and I thought, well, I'm down here, I'll just snap off a quick photo and then I'll you know maybe do something else or whatever. But I had forgotten to use my headlamp. So just to make matters stupider, what happened was it was just completely pitch dark, and in order to figure out my lighting, I had to actually memorize steps in there because I had forgotten to use my headlamp or anything else to light the way. So I was literally counting 14 steps here, shine the light here, then turn right, walk 8 steps, shine the light here, then walk around this way, so I can walk to the back of the camera. And it was just the dumbest possible thing to do in that sort of environment, but that's what I did. So I snapped one photo, and then I said, I think that's enough of this. And I got out of there and, started photographing something else. But wow, that was intense.
Well, at least you can say you did it. I threw it up on the screen here while you were talking a little bit about it, and
Okay.
it's I look at the picture and I think to myself, nah, good for you for getting down there. That's like you could
glad
check.
You did that, not me.
Yeah, check it off the list. Go up the stairs. Yeah, because this was a if I recall, this was almost like a basement level underneath the main building. So you went down 3 or 4 steps. Yeah. In fact, people who know us or have watched another video on this channel know that we use two-way radios to do a lot of communicating. We had the two-way radios. That's one of the places too that we had a little bit of static. And I think when you were down in there, we were having a little bit of a hard time communicating with you because you were both underground and behind stone.
Right.
So
yeah, those are some thick walls.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for obvious reasons, but it was a weird, creepy place that just overall there was, even just walking by there, like I walked by there a couple times because that was in the back courtyard area, and to get to other places, and it's almost like you could just feel the cold air coming out of there,
Yeah, it was cooler back there, and wow, it was just, I don't really believe in that kind of thing most of the time. I'm a pretty nuts and bolts sort of person for the most part, but that was so unbelievably creepy. I mean, the whole place is creepy, but that was the creepiest place in a very creepy place.
Well, that brings up a good point that I hinted on earlier is like, when you walk into these places, because people do ask, are you scared? Have you ever seen anything weird? Do you ever catch those orbs? All the stuff that my answer is pretty much no to all of that. My concern primarily is safety. Right. Like if something happened and you were by yourself down there, and I don't mean like something grabbed you and pulled you into a dark corner. I just mean you tripped, whatever, health emergency and so on. Those are my biggest concerns. Yeah. But there's something about that place that I think just knowing the history and having been on the tour that adds to that whole feel of like, there's like a weight to it.
Oh yeah.
It certainly felt that way.
Because the electric chair is there, right? It's on display when you walk in.
Yeah, it's like right in the front.
Correct.
I remember seeing it. Yeah, I think I tried to get a picture of it. So, but you gave some great history on that, and a lot of that stuff I had no idea. I had no idea about. The building does look pretty old when you drive up to it. What people may not know, I'll add this to your notes, is that it now is open to the public. And when we were there, the way we got access, which is always another question people have, is we got access thanks to Mike through a contact that he had, but also we paid to do a ghost tour.
Right.
A self-guided ghost tour, which essentially meant we had access to certain areas without restriction, which was really neat. Yeah.
And I wanted to point out right now that all the lights were off because that's the idea of a ghost tour. Plus, as night photographers, we want the lights off. So the whole place was completely dark, just adding to the creep factor, of course.
Yep.
And you're wandering around in this Gothic stone architecture place. It has turrets. It looks like a castle. You know about all the violence. There's bats flying through there. I mean, just the whole place is just, it was so imposing.
Sounds. Yeah. You're in a giant cell block. It's just you, and you hear a creak or a tap or a drip or a flap. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss discussion all of a sudden. But it was really, really creepy. The only lighting we had, I think, was nearby. There was some sodium vapor lighting because there was a street that went by. So there were certain.
There's like a street there.
Yeah, there were some windows that were kind of bringing that in. But for those of you out there who want to experience that, you should look them up because they may still be offering something like that. There was another offering they told me about. In fact, Mike, I think it was your security friend that had mentioned the it was like wine and scream or whatever it was. It was like a ladies' night they would have in there. Was that what it was called?
I think they also do something around Halloween where there's like an escape room, I think.
Nice.
And they actually have it's behind a door, and I could never get there because it's locked. But for like the Halloween thing, they actually have a casket that they'll bring out and use around Halloween.
Well,
so if you want to up the creep factor a little more, go there around Halloween because they've got a casket they'll bring.
Well, on the way to the sugar room, there's a room before that room that you walk through, and they had Halloween decorations put up. So there were skeletons and things like that. Just because apparently the sugar shack isn't creepy enough by itself. They have to add that. So, but there. Both of you went up to the psych ward on the second floor, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Which was, speaking of creepy.
Yeah, just the idea of a psych ward in an abandoned state was weird.
Right.
We did get treated to a couple stories while we were up there because we had a guide that was helping us. And also, Mike, wasn't there like a full dental office up there also?
The dental office had the chair that gives you the comfortable feeling to lay back in, and
that's right.
And it had the little spittoon where you can spit out all the junk that they cleaned out of your mouth.
Yeah, and I photographed a medical room too that was on the second floor. And actually, that was about 15 minutes before we had to leave. So I quickly did my light painting. I did one setup, light painted the whole thing, and was done in about 7 minutes. Just the whole thing.
Yeah,
just
it's amazing.
One shot, that's it. And then I scrambled down the stairs and met you guys.
It's amazing how fast you can work when you know you're on a timetable. We had 4 hours in there, I think.
Right.
I think that's right.
Yeah, which initially sounds like a lot of time, and then all of a sudden you've only got an hour left.
It goes by in a hurry.
Yeah, it goes really fast.
Yeah, the first hour I was in there, it was more like, ooh, there's so many different ideas, But we had access to 2 cell blocks, right?
We had cell block J and K was one of them.
There was a corridor in between. There were a couple rooms within that. Then we had an access to the entire back courtyard area, which included a prison bus and a basketball. Oh, I have a story.
There was a chapel.
Cool.
But tell us your story.
I have a story about one of the creepiest things that I can't believe I forgot this. One of the creepiest things that had ever happened to me happened there. And in the end, I remember it like it was yesterday, and I remember how I feel when it was happening. I was like, this is insane. All right, so here it is. I was shooting towards the back of the building, and there was a doorway, and I'm pretty sure I told you guys this story. I think I told you over the radio that night. There was a doorway, and you could see out to the basketball hoop area, and I'm doing my light painting, and this door is cracked just a little bit, and I'm shining my light around, and I catch what I think is a pair of eyeballs about 2 feet off the ground. So my initial thought is, okay, so this is an animal. I'm catching like a coyote or something. So I'm looking. Now, it's far enough away where I can only see the eyeballs. It's just pitch black outside this door. And then I watch these eyeballs start to levitate. They're staring at me the whole time. 5 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet. And then they just disappear out of view of the fence. Do you remember the story?
Vaguely, yes.
Okay, all right. So
yeah, barely.
I run outside.
But it's creeping me out.
Yeah, I run outside because I want to see what this is. It's not a bird. Just imagine you see eyes in the distance that are staring at you the entire time and rising at a very steady and slow rate. I couldn't explain it, and I had to know what it was. So I ran outside, very interested, but also very creeped out about what I was going to find and whether or not that would be the last thing I'd ever see. I grabbed the brightest light I had and I shined it. Turns out what I was seeing was a raccoon climbing the wire fence around the basketball hoop area around the court. And it was staring at me the whole time, climbing up the fence. But it was the weirdest thing. And already having the heebie-jeebies, I was in a room that had, you'll know this room, Ken. I'm going to put a picture of it up there. It was the room that had the post office next to it. And then it also had there was like a fireplace, an old like iron fireplace in there.
Yeah.
I had just finished shooting that, and that room is super creepy because it looks like some sort of weird Victorian abandoned mansion. All the paint's peeling down. You just have this, you're just imagining that you're inhaling a ton of lead dust, or I don't know what's going on in there. And then I'd walked into this really dark room. So I was already in full creep out mode at that point. But
interesting thing is that at one point, you and I were both in adjoining rooms with our backs to each other, photographing, but our lights somehow were not interfering with each other.
Right. I do remember that. And that was a testament to how big that place was and how small the openings were between these cavernous areas. Because then, by the way, there was also an entire like kitchen area. I didn't really do any shooting in there.
There was some dining hall.
Right.
Yeah, if I'd had more time, I would have. But they had like the ovens, and they had that whole dining kitchen area that had a lot of the stainless steel stuff in there. But it looked completely dilapidated and destroyed. That was the last room I think I ended up in before I was like, all right, I'm just about out of time. I'll get this next time if I ever come back here.
We could spend weeks.
Oh, yeah, there's so much there.
There's so much to photograph. I hope we can go back there again.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah, and shooting in the prison stuff too. The actual jail part.
Yeah.
Where you can get inside the jail cells and then blast the light out. I have a shot that I'll throw up. You blast the light out through those bars and get all those nice shadows. There's a lot of great symmetry in there. Yeah, a lot of good angles to work with. And we had access to the second level too. So if you wanted to light down, you could do that. I mean, for what, I don't remember what we paid to get in there. And then of course we split it 3 ways, but for the access that we got and the amount of space, I mean, in the time, I mean, it was a fantastic experience. I'd recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now I'll say the first time I went there was the creepiest of all the times. Because I knew I knew the psych ward existed, and that was where I really wanted to go. And so the guy was kind of a security guard who was, I guess you could say, showing me around. He helped me get up there, and when we got up there, it was, so the big problem that night was it was raining.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking gully washer, you could hear it pounding on the roof, even though you're only on the second floor. You could just hear it. And so then inside the psych ward, there were a few places where you could hear the water dripping.
That's creepy.
So, yeah.
Seriously.
And so it's not like there's a whole lot of noise other than you hear the rain and then you hear some of the dripping. Well, I'd probably been up there maybe 10 minutes and Eric's like, oh, hey, I got to go. I don't even know what it was he did. So he's like, I'll be back. And I'm like, okay. So he takes off. I hear the door shut behind him when he walks out. And so then it's just me in the psych ward.
And that's the part where you hear.
Yeah. And so although I didn't hear things, I didn't feel cold or whatever, I never saw any orbs. There was nothing like that, but just being there was very creepy. And of course, Eric, the nice guy that he was, when he came back, he had opened the door very quietly, and I don't know what it was he picked up, but he opened the door very quietly, and then he threw something down the hallway. So as I'm in there, you hear something clank, 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 clank. And I assumed it was him. So I said, I'm not laughing, Eric. Of course, by this time I practically wet myself.
I think I like Eric better already. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
He should have dragged a chain across the floor.
Yeah, exactly. I'll teach you.
Oh yeah. You see, if he had been smart, he would have had a bag of jokes like that: chains, bells, things that you can scrape on walls, squeaky sounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
So another place in West Virginia that I'd love to go to is the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston. But they're a lot harder to access at night. They only have photography things in May, I think it is. But that would be so great to get into at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but so you can get in there under certain circumstances.
Yeah, but that place is super creepy, in a way that Moundsville is. If you like Moundsville and you find it creepy, you definitely find this place creepy too. And this place is a huge sprawling place. So it's another one of those places where you could spend like 180 nights there in a row and still not photograph everything.
Right.
Isn't it? It's also like a Gothic building, isn't it?
It's just like Moundsville. It's also Gothic architecture. Yeah.
We also visited on a different trip. Was it a different? No, was it the same trip? The place up in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania was
Embryville. Is that
Oh,
what it's called?
Yeah, that was next year's trip.
Oh, right. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So the West Virginia trip, we also went to the abandoned amusement park.
that's right.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Didn't we make a run at Cass also? But it ended up being rainy.
Mm-hmm.
It was
so we
super
went over
rainy.
to the VLA, or not the VLA. We went over to the radio telescopes nearby. That was
Correct.
That was a brief fun shoot.
And then it started pouring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, that I don't know if West Virginia just has a lot of that kind of weird stuff down there, but that place, the amusement park, the abandoned amusement park, and the abandoned in that it's not operating, but not abandoned as in that the owners live on the property. So just,
Yeah. Semi-abandoned.
Semi-abandoned. That was an interesting place.
It's abandoned just in the sense that they don't fix it up or do anything. They just let it decay, and they let all the plants and ivy and everything grow on it. So it's abandoned in that sense.
There were two interesting points about that place that kind of stick out, and it had to do with the tour that the woman was giving us, the owner, before we got access to shoot it. So another similar situation, we got paid access to shoot, which is always a great thing because you can go into a location and not be worried about, like, is somebody going to blow the whistle on your shoot,
Right.
There's a whole weight that goes away when you can be there and people know you're there, and it's totally cool. The first thing that they had talked about that I remembered was that they found I believe they found a Native American burial
I think that's right.
somewhere on that property. well after it had already been established. And so, you know, kind of a cemetery feel. And then the other thing, do you remember that? I think it was the ride, the chain swing ride they were talking about.
Right.
One that went around.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were chair swings, I believe, and it just went around and around and around, and something happened. Was that
Something
where the little
something
girl
happened to someone that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the little girl who died on that, if I recall correctly. But there were also a lot of like Native American massacres and things like that on the property, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, yep. So there was definitely some serious history there. And then the other thing that was just kind of an interesting side note was that they were talking about one of the rides. It might have been the Ferris wheel. One of the rides they had tracked down. They were trying to find a particular type of Ferris wheel to put there, and they put it there. And then they found out through some research that that actual ride had been in that actual park way back in the day. And it had returned unbeknownst to these people. It was the same one that had already been there before, after it went off to somewhere else. So that was just kind of an interesting little tidbit. But that place was a little different because you were outside, and almost everything we shot was outside. There were some little structures here and there, but it was all about the rides and the vines, like you said, going up around the rides. But sometime maybe around 11 o'clock at night, we had a beautiful, bright full moon that night. But then this mist moved in. You remember that?
There was this eerie mist over Lake Shawnee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lake Shawnee had this eerie mist, and it looks like one of those, you know, super creepy movies where there's always a mist on the ground. It looked just like that.
It so totally did, and the way the moon was hitting it.
Yeah,
that was really amazing. Just I got a bunch of shots of just that lake, not a very big lake.
No,
with the mist over it, because that just did it for me. But that was a really neat shoot and creepy in a completely different way. Not the creepiest, not like Moundsville where I thought something's going to happen and eyes are floating and all sorts of stuff. But more historical creepy in that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bad energy, you know, like you knew stuff happened there, and a lot of different things happened there where, you know, in Moundsville, certain things are going to happen, you know, because that's the type of place that it is. But here's a field, and a lot of other things just seem to happen in that area, and much of it was unrelated to the next event. So we all survived. So that's the important part. And I don't think I brought anything home with me that I didn't mean to. You know, I didn't have any weird hitchhikers on the way back.
Oh, that's good to know.
That's a good sign.
Yeah. Yeah. So creepy places, Moundsville. Yeah, that would get my top vote for sure.